Welcome back to Storytime with Jenny Presents. Now, I don't know why you're still coming back, but woohoo! I'm making the story still. So today's story is the only time I've been arrested, aka the time I got screwed over for two checks, one $5 check and one $7 check. Thank you, Arkansas. So I used the word check so that you already know. Woohoo! This was a long time ago. I was living in Fayetteville, Arkansas at the time, and I actually was getting ready to move from Fayetteville and move up into the next place I lived after that. Don't you worry, there'll be a story on all of the whole bunch of places that I have lived. But when I left Fayetteville, I went to my bank, and at the time it was I don't remember what they were originally. They're Bank of America now, and I don't know how many other bank changes that they've been since then, but I know that I made sure to follow along so I knew which bank was theirs, so nothing like this would happen in the future. And honestly, I was bitter. And you'll hear why. You might be bitter too. Let me know below. I'm supposed to say that, hey, let me know below, like and subscribe. That feels weird to say though. So instead, let's talk about something way less weird. So I went to my bank before I left, and again, this was back in the day. So there was a check register that you kept track of, the check number, the location that you wrote the check out to, and the amount. And then whenever you heard about anybody balancing their checkbook, what they were doing was, for some reason, some people, and I don't understand this, some people wouldn't always calculate the math on how much was left over after they wrote checks, or they would wait weeks before they did that. And I did not do that. That seemed insane to me. So I always knew what my running tally was in my bank. And I actually went inside the bank, because that's what you did back then. And I went through my register and I went through all of the check numbers. These were handwritten, all of the check numbers and all of the amounts. And I actually got the remaining money that was left in, pulled out in cash, and I closed my account down, and then I moved. And I didn't think anything of it. And honestly, I probably never would have thought about it again until it was a couple of years, plural, later. I had gone down to Arkansas to introduce the person at that time. He was my fiance. He ended up, of course, being my husband. I don't mean, of course, ignore that. But I ended up marrying him. At the time, we were going down to meet some of my old friends, and I was introducing them to my fiance. And we were driving back from that visit, and we were 5 miles away from the Missouri state line, and we got pulled over. I did not know at the time of the weekend that we had picked to go down there was the big craft fair festival. Ooh, gonna sound a little country here, but I did say Arkansas, so so it was the big craft fair festival, and it was a festival that was through all sorts of the towns over there. Bentonville, Fayetteville, Rogers, all did like big things, and there were different locations that had these different art tents and craft tents, and it was a really big deal. And there were always a lot of people that came in from out of town. And this is the reason I wish I had known, the cops were a little bit more on par with just pulling over everybody that had an out-of-state plate, because if you have an out-of-state plate, you're more likely to just pay the ticket and not fight it, because most people don't want to come back. And Not to say that that's something that's done now, but I can tell you definitively it's something that was done then, because we weren't speeding, we weren't doing anything illegal at the time. He pulled us over because we had out-of-state plates. And at the time, my husband had a warrant out for his, or my, I apologize. He was my fiance then. I'm probably going to call him my husband a couple more times because that's how I'm used to referencing him as. We are not married anymore. That's my left hand. That's my right hand. We are not married anymore, and haven't been together in well over 20 years. But it was, there was a warrant out for his arrest. And while that's a whole other story, I will get into that because that is, I just thought for a moment, and that would be a whole other tangent. And we're not going to go there. We're going to go the first time I was arrested. So he was arrested and put in the back of the squad car. And the cop asked me for my ID to ensure that I was okay to drive, which is par for the course. And so I gave him my driver's license, and he came back out, asked me to step out of the car, and told me that I too was under arrest. I was extraordinarily confused because I'd not ever done anything that would get me arrested at that point in time. I was a baby. I was, as a matter of fact, I was 20 when this happened. So, a really long time ago. But he was arresting me because he said that there was a warrant out for my arrest for bouncing checks in Fayetteville, and that they would be extraditing. And this was a Bentonville police officer. And Bentonville and Fayetteville are only like maybe 30 minutes apart, but it's really hard to tell because they've all grown together now. They weren't very far before from growing together. So I was really confused, and he was like, you have bad checks. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he explained to me that my check, that I actually had two bounced checks. One of them was for $5 and one of them was for $7. Yes, indeed, I wrote checks for that low of an amount. Sometimes it had to be done. Cash wasn't as readily available. And cards weren't as readily available at that time. So he put me in cuffs. Now, a couple of important things I want to mention for this is, one, I had a fresh belly button piercing at that point in time, within a week, fresh. And two, they put the cuffs on so tight. I'm not exaggerating. I know that cuffs aren't supposed to be comfortable, but by the time the cuffs were finally removed from my wrists, they were almost bleeding all the way across on both hands. It was that deep. And they put me in the back seat with him, and they take us to the local Bentonville jail. And at that point in time, we went into the same place, and since we were together and the holding cell that they had was both male and female, they weren't going to put me in the holding cell, which is, I was a little questionable about the legality of some of the things that they did. Way past time, of course, at this point to say anything about it. But the cuffs that first officer put on me were never removed once. I was cuffed behind my back for the entirety of the next part of this story. As a matter of fact, I was cuffed behind my back for 4 hours with cuffs that were tight enough. And that's part of the reason why I was almost bleeding, was the amount of time I was in the cuffs. So they weren't booking me, so they weren't supposed to be doing anything like taking a mugshot or doing fingerprinting or anything like that. They weren't supposed to be processing me. What they actually should have been doing at that point in time is putting me in a holding cell, which was where the phones were for phone calls, to allow me to take and make phone calls during the time in which they were waiting for an officer from Fayetteville to come and pick me up. They instead left me cuffed behind my back in a bench out front. And I watched a lot of people be getting booked in. They searched me 3 times during that wait. And I don't mean your regular pat you down search. I mean cuffed behind my back, taken into a room where it was just me and another woman, in which she was thoroughly searching the entirety of my body. Fingers were in places. And while it was not a strip search per se, she did indeed have my shirt removed as much as she possibly could with the cuffs on. And she had pulled my breasts out of the bra because she said that would be the only way that she could search. And then 3 times this happened. In the 4 hours, I was in holding for them. Holding, because again, I was just sitting cuffed behind my back on a bench. I know that they didn't follow proper procedure based off of how the Fayetteville cop reacted to me and them when he encountered me and was talking to them when they were doing the exchange, because they did take a mugshot of me and they weren't supposed to, because they weren't processing me. And they were actually trying to get in me to get fingerprinted when the Fayetteville cops showed up, because they just had nothing else to do with me. And they're like, well, we don't want to put her in the holding cell with him. I don't understand the logic behind it at all whatsoever, but that's what they did. And the other reason I know that the cop from Fayetteville strongly disagreed with what they did was, 1, he cuffed me in front. When he took the cuffs off of my wrists, the noises he made when he saw the shape that my wrists were in. And when he cuffed me in front, he cuffed me where it was loose enough that I could have just slid my hands right out. I didn't, mind you. I was a little bit terrified, and I'm not going to lie, a tiny bit traumatized by what had happened to me up to that point. So as soon as I got to the Fayetteville jail, the very first thing they did was let me have access to a payphone. I'm that old. To a payphone in order to be able to start making phone calls. Now, back in the day, you either memorized numbers or had something in which you carried around that had the numbers on them. Most women carry purses. That's never been my thing. But I smoked at the time, and I had a cigarette case. And inside the cigarette case, there was taped a little sheet of paper that had the list of contact numbers for the people that I knew I might need to get a hold of. And so I had my mom's contact number on there. This was back when we still had contact with each other. And so she was who I called. I thought that's who you were supposed to call. And she got a lawyer, and they came and she paid a bond and bailed me out. And then she wouldn't listen to a word that I had to say about my treatment. That was something I do remember really bothered me, because I was trying to explain that I was being treated really poorly in that Bentonville jail. And Mom's exact response was, well, they're just treating you like the criminal that you are. And I was trying to explain to her that I wasn't a criminal. I went into the bank. I withdrew money. Like, if there had been open checks, then why would they be giving me cash back? Somebody made a mistake. AKA, it was probably the teller that gave me the cash and told me that those checks had cleared. And Mom wouldn't listen to me. And instead, what she said was that she was going to take care of it, because at the time I was living in Lebanon, Missouri. And so I get back up to, once I actually, get my sanity and stuff back, I end up having to pay, it was over $560 worth of fees and fines for those bounce checks. And that was Mom's taking care of it. Was she told the lawyer that it didn't matter, that I would pay whatever fees would be necessary, and that would just be fine. And she just went with the absolute cheapest lawyer she could find, and didn't tell me that until many years later. So that is the one and only time that I have been arrested. I do have to say, 100% do not recommend. It was not pleasant. And yeah, I really hope that no one has to go through that. Okay, well, on that really happy note, yay! Signing off. No one made it this far.